once you get the first customer and the second customer, this is where most startups are not squeezing the lemon good enough. You have someone that already bought into your product, get the feedback, understand from them what in the messaging, the marketing process, the sales process made them say yes. And when you get the first one, now try to find a few more like that person or like that company, and then squeeze that client all the way with testimonials, because once they are championing the product, it doesn't become sales. It becomes this organic force that the market is driving for you.
Hey, Moti, so it's great to have you on the show. We both know each other through hyperspace. I was really impressed by Moti's marketing skills and the ability for storytelling. And I know that he's been helping a lot of founders out there with pitching in a new methodology compared to the old pitch deck way. Moti, how about if you introduce yourself?
Daniel, thank you so much for having me. I miss the days of us working together. Looking at your podcast and it looks amazing. So I'm delighted and honored to be here as one of your guests. So a bit about myself, you touched upon it a little bit. I am the co-founder of Atlantic Brands, which is an agency that specializes in two things: helping founders and startups with investor pitching, storytelling, and everything that goes into it. And the other arm of our operation is fractional CMOs services. So we specialize in growing startups from the freemium-led sales or founder-led sales stage all the way to hopefully millions of dollars in ARR. So those are the two services we provide, and happy to start a conversation.
I'm excited, Moti. I think that you have a lot to share. And from marketer to marketer, I think that I can learn a lot. So I would ask, first of all, what's the most common thread that you see with different startups in helping them get their first customers, or from your experience of being in a startup?
That's a great question. When it comes to marketing, and that's the area that both of us work in, I notice that startups are very, very reactive most of the time to marketing in comparison to the point in time of the life of the startups, meaning they always come to me, and I bet you've seen it in your job as well, where they're saying like, we need leads, we need leads, we need to create sales, we need to create sales. Now, obviously you need to create sales, right? No money, no business. But what startups are missing early on, if you're building your startup, your company with the right branding building blocks, you understand what it is that you're trying to convey, what is your agenda, and the process transformation you're bringing to the market. And if you're doing it consistently, then people will start to resonate the startup with the agenda. And what I'm seeing early on, the reason so many startups are spending so much money without seeing return on their investment is because they're not sure as to what they want to say. They're not sticking to the purpose for which they started the startup, and they're trying to be opportunistic in the way they go about lead generation. And in that point in time, many of them find themselves in this scenario. They rush to hire a BDR or an SDR. They rush to hire a sales consultant, and they realize things are still not working. And the reason things are still not working is because they failed to really formalize their agenda and what it is that they're bringing to the market. And when I say agenda, I don't mean product feature. I don't mean the technology. I mean the process transformation that you're going for, what it is that you want to make different in this world. And you have to have the audience resonate with the message rather than chasing the audience and adapt the message to the audience. And this is how you will create very meaningful inbound and position into your brand, if that makes sense.
I think that it makes a lot of sense. And one of the difficulties that I face with different startups is I think the founders get that. They say, okay, like maybe let's have a messaging workshop. We have a vision, we have something we want to do. But first of all, I feel like many times it can be extremely hard to create strong differentiation. And number two is, even if you have it all set, you may be pivoting the next day, especially if you're early on. So how do you stay agile with that? I mean, like, because otherwise you could spend, like 7K every month or every 2 months on redoing the messaging and your purpose from the start, right?
Right. So here's the thing. Everyone establishes a company for a purpose, right? There is an idea, there is a vision, there is something that um, incentivizes those founders to start a company. Now, pivoting is great. You need to be agile, but pivoting comes when the market is giving you strong signals that there is a demand for something. And when you get those strong signals, it's okay to pivot. But what happens very often is that startups are starting their kind of go to market efforts. They are not getting the sales they want very quickly. And then they are starting to think, like, in month two, what is wrong with the messaging? What is wrong with our ads? What is wrong with our SEO? What's not working? Now, it's great to analyze it all the time, but we have to understand that marketing is more about farming and not about hunting. And you have to kind of stay true to yourself and say, look, this is the purpose that I believe the startup should go with, and try to push that agenda and let the agenda resonate with your audience. Now, if you're pushing something and it's working well, right? But then all of a sudden you get demand for other features, other product attributions, or other use cases, that's great. You can pivot. But pivot when you see the demand. Don't pivot after a month where a single campaign didn't work. So in those cases, what I like to do is say, okay, you know what? Let's start a lot of small fires and see what's catching. If the founder insists on doing, I don't know, LinkedIn ads and Google ads and whatever it is, okay, then let's invest a little bit in both, see what catches fire, and then put some gasoline on that thing that caught fire. And then you realize the marketing method is working very well for you. But I would be very cautious in changing the messaging every month. You have to let it resonate. And that is not a one time thing process. But the point of the story is that if you have a messaging that you believe in, that you believe in the value prop of your company, you have to convey it consistently. If it's not going to happen consistently, it's not going to stick. And there is a beer brand that is called Michelob Ultra. And Michelob Ultra, every Super Bowl, they come up with an ad and a different tagline for the beer. Like every year, they have a different tagline. And the brand is not catching fire because every year they try to speak to a different audience, to with a different kind of messaging. They're just trying to see what's going to catch instead of going with a brand identity. I mean, if you look at Corona, Corona is beach, right? It's fun. It's been, swimming. It's summery. It's cool. So it's hot. So it's easy to resonate that brand identity with the beer. When you're changing your messaging every month, you're really harming yourself more than you're being opportunistic, which is very bad.
Got it. So I think that makes sense. So we do need some form of basis rather than pivoting every month. With that being said, do you think there is a quantitative way to approach this? Meaning, okay, here's our messaging, here's the way we're going to attack it. And by month X, we should see something happen. If not, then we know it's not working.
So by month X, we'll know if this campaign is working, not if the messaging is working or not. So here's the thing, an agenda is the reason for which marketing efforts are built upon and companies are built upon. If you tried a certain campaign, maybe the audience was wrong, maybe the budget was wrong, maybe the timing was wrong, maybe the creative was wrong. There's so many variables that goes into it. I think that what's really important to understand at the very early stages of the startup is, where does your audience live? Do they live on LinkedIn? Do they live in a community on Discord and Slack, whatever it is? Where do they live? Once you realize where they live, you have to master that channel. Choose one channel of communication. Don't go over all the social media platforms and all the communities you can go after. And then try the different messaging in that community because you know where that's where your audience is. Now, once you get the first customer and the second customer, this is where most startups are not squeezing the lemon good enough. You have someone that already bought into your product, get the feedback, understand from them what in the messaging, the marketing process, the sales process made them say yes. And when you get the first one, now try to find a few more like that person or like that company. And then squeeze that client all the way with testimonials, webinars, sessions, whatever it is, collaborations in trade shows. Make that person or that company be your champion. Because once they are championing the product, it doesn't become sales. It becomes this organic force that the market is driving for you.
I like that a lot, and I think the power of customer testimonials is often overlooked. Do you have a good strategy on collaborating with customers? Especially if you're working with high profile people that just don't have time for anything. And it may even hurt the relationship with them. Like you're trying to get those testimonials, you're trying to work together, um, maybe even for both of your brand's sake. But they just don't have that time. And then maybe at some point you end up bothering them or hurting the relationship. How do you go about that?
Well, from my experience, I realized one thing. When you ask people, they have the tendency, people you're in a relationship with, a professional relationship with, to do something, they have the tendency to say yes. And once you hit that kind of small win with the client and the chemistry is going and the engagement is going well, just ask for it. Just ask for it, and you'll see that they'll say yes because they want to help your company. And most companies are actually fans of startups. They know that the startup is going to work very hard for them and they want the startup to be successful. And I always found that they say yes. So, what I love to do is I love to humanize my product. I don't like to sell features. So I love to bring the people who are using the product, speak about the product, share how that product changed their lives, but give tangible, tangible content, engaging content that is also convertible, meaning I can take it and I can put it to work the day after. Not just, another sales webinar where we're self-glorifying our product. So bring the customer to talk about the customer. Don't bring the customer to talk about you. Speak about their life, how it changed their operation, the benefits they're getting from them, and let them say it. Let them speak because they live a language that you're not living. They live a world that you're not living because they are part of the work that you're trying to penetrate to.
You know what I really like about this? It reminds me of the book, I think, Story Brand by Dan Miller. Not sure if you're familiar, but the idea
Yeah.
is the customer is the hero. Many times when you're a startup founder, you say, I'm the hero. I'm going to create this life force that takes over the market or whatever. But I think it's really important to remember that the customer is the hero and the brand is Yoda guiding Luke Skywalker, right? So when you mentioned the webinar and the focus on the customer, and then other customers or potential customers see that, they're like, wait, I could be a hero too. This brand
Yeah,
allowed them, right?
absolutely. There is one thing that I really love doing with every startup that I'm working with, and regardless of the vertical that startup operates in. And that is a virtual summit, a half day event with open panel discussions, one after the other, that is talking about the challenges the industry is facing. Now, the reason I like doing that, and I've done it with multiple companies and spent $0 on each effort, because we just asked people to, thought leaders from the vertical to attend, and they said yes. But the reason I love it is because the startup, first of all, it's zero resources pretty much. But then you gather around you a lot of thought leaders who are sharing insights on the industry. And by letting them speak about the pain, by letting them speak about the process transformation they need in their industry, you associate yourself with that thought leadership influencers, with those thought leaders, um, and you become the problem solver. So what I'm trying to say is that don't make your marketing about you. Don't make your promotion efforts about you or about your product. You have to bring your audience to the world through other people who are willing to explain, share, and elaborate about what it is that you're solving. And when you're just trying to feature dump ads, and when you're just, bragging about clients and logos that you have, that's not convincing. If you ask me what is the best form of testimonial, is not to say how great your product is. It's for me to come on a webinar, share thoughts, insights on the pain, how the pain is solved, um, and humanize the process we took together.
Got it. Do you have, first of all, again, I really like that. Do you have any perhaps stories or examples where you see the effect that it had on a certain startup that you worked with? Perhaps like the before and the after of doing a series of webinars or telling their story with certain testimonials and whatnot.
Absolutely. I work with this company, they're in the procurement space. And the CEO hired me for fractional CMO services. And she said, look, I need a lot of exposure, both in my industry, in my vertical, but I also need this wow effect that will allow future investors to see that, we have great positioning in the market. And I came to this founder and said, you know what, how about if we'll do a half-day virtual summit? That's my go-to. I love doing those things. It will cost you nothing. Let's ask 20 influencers from your network to participate in this half-day event, 4 people um, in every panel, including a moderator. And we'll line up really hot topic conversations for people to address that the byproduct of those conversations, is going to relate to the services you offer. So we're not going to sell your product. We're going to have people talk about all the pains your product is solving. So she told me there is no way we'll be able to pull such a thing. It's a mega effort. It's going to take us months. We pulled it up in 3.5 weeks. We picked the right people from our network, pick the time, pick the date, choose the topics, start picking up the phone. Within a couple of days, we had about 17 people lined up for a half-day event. And all of a sudden, you have an event that you spend $0 on. $0. You just called thought leaders from your network, asked them to participate. They said yes. You have 17 logos of a half-day event, and you are on the top left because you're the first speaker. You have the opening statement of the event, so all eyes are on you. And now you just created unbelievable market positioning for yourself. So all of a sudden, you go from, let's say, 0 logos in your arsenal to have 17 logos affiliated with you. And then you push that effort to all of your database, your audience in your vertical. And they're saying, whoa, this must be a massive company if they were able to pull up all those logos. They probably have a massive budget. And they don't know, we just called and asked. We spent $0 on it. So what happened at the end of it is that the company went from an unknown company to a leader in its vertical. It was recognized in every trade show because all those thought leaders participated in the panel. And they had a massive event to show to potential investors they were talking to at that time and say, look how many logos are coming in to interact with our companies. So what I'm saying at the end of it is that as a startup, don't sell your product. The best way of selling your product is not to sell it at all. Is to let other people speak about the process you're solving. And by that, the affiliation you're going to create as the solution to those problems will organically be generated. And that to me is far greater and better and more impactful than another Google ad or another LinkedIn ad. Because at the end of the day, people will always buy from people. And once you put a face to the problem and you create an affiliation to the problem, you're creating a pretty powerful cycle.
I like that a lot. I like that it can fit any stage startup. I like that it doesn't cost too much money. I love the network effect and the affiliation and just the power that an event like this can create. I think my next question is, okay, it sounds great, but what would my overall program or agenda be, right? So I do have this one webinar coming up in 2 months. I arranged the calls, I got the logos, right? Um, During the event, do I have to have some form of call to action throughout the event? Um, Oftentimes you come into these events and you see a bunch of logos and you don't look into them more than what's necessary, right? So I guess two questions. One is, how frequent do these things need to be? How much effort are we talking about if it's one of our main channels? And then the next question is, assuming I do these events, how do I make sure that my audience does know that I'm not just another logo? How do they know that I'm the one who can solve those pain points?
Well, you're the one that created this event. So you're in the power position. And at the opening of the event, I always put the CEO or the founder first to speak about the company. And so all eyes on the CEO. And at that point, the CEO can say exactly what the company is doing. But what's interesting, again, is that now you created not only a powerful event, not only did you bring powerful people and you increased your positioning, you created so much content that you can repurpose now in all sort of channels, in all sort of ways, and depends on the channel that you go after. And that will live forever. That truly lives forever. So I do the summits twice a year because if you do them every month, that's just becoming redundant. Typically, I recommend startups to do a summit twice a year. And there's so many things that you can do for free. Against this summit cost $0. Um, and I really believe that for early stage startups, once you have your agenda right and you know what you want to say, you don't need to spend a lot of money on marketing. You can bring someone like you or myself as a consultant, experienced consultant, to bring the strategy and also to execute on the strategy. But the summit is one example. There is one other thing that I really like, and every time I tell it to founders, they think I'm crazy, and that is newsletters. And when I tell a founder, look, I think newsletters are going to work very well, they tell me, okay, what am I paying you to do marketing techniques from the early 2000s? We are 2024. And I said, let me do the newsletters. When you do the newsletters right, I found more than anything that they convert like crazy. And the reason for it is, again, we need to understand that as companies, we are not coming to gain value. We're coming to give value. So what I want to do all the time is share information, share best practices, give you the ability to take my knowledge and implement it tomorrow, even without hiring me. Once you get that knowledge and you see how I created this small win for you, you'll come and ask for more. I'll give you an example. As I said, part of my work is investor pitching. My methodology, my cookbook for investor pitching is all over LinkedIn, all over Medium. Everyone can go read my work process, my philosophy to investor pitching, how I go about it. But guess what? That's the biggest inbound generator I have. Because they realize that once you have someone who generated this document that holds so much knowledge, you wanted someone by your side. So I stay away from saying, I create a pitch deck that converts and will get you your investment within 3 meetings. Bullshit. That's not going to happen. I'm sharing my thought process, my philosophy, my tactics on how to raise money. And when people read it, they resonate with it. They resonate with the agenda I'm bringing to the table, and they reach out. The same thing should be applied to startups in marketing. Create content that is engaging, that is light, fun to read, but that is actionable. Deliver content that is actionable, that shows people you have the secret sauce, you have the know-how on how to solve this thing that you're trying to solve. Once people see it, they're not going to try to solve it themselves because they don't have time, but they will call you to solve it for them.
I really love this thought process. And now I'd like to take it to a tactical level. So if you mentioned earlier that a newsletter, or it could also be a blog, right? Or any other place. So let's say I'm startup X and I have a newsletter now. What I would be doing now is show throughout my newsletter how you can achieve A, B, and C that's actionable right now, even if you don't want to use my product? Or would
Yeah.
I put myself within the flow over there?
No, I'll give you the 3 tips on how you can do it today. I don't like to share statistics. I don't like to say 20% of product marketer use this and this and that. Great. How is that helping me? Or I like to give people information that can help them in their lives. And once I help them with their lives, in their professional lives, then they want to engage more because they think that, or they know that I probably know more. So I'll give you another example. I work with a fintech company that is in the debt resolution space. And when we started the newsletters, I worked with their product team and I researched the product insights and I got a lot of really powerful data from there. And in that resolution, me coming in as an average person, I thought to myself, well, people who are in debt will most likely prefer installment options over a single payment to resolve their debt, right? Makes sense because the reason you're in debt is because you don't have money. Well, actually, their studies show that when engaged with their app, 68% of people preferred a single time payment to resolve the debt. Now, why is that critical for you as a debt collector? Because you're thinking to yourself, you know what? Let me send marketing campaigns with interest-free installment and push installment, because it's common sense, right? But in fact, now I opened your mind to the data point that 68% of them prefer a single time payment. So now you can offer a single payment, you can collect faster, and you're out. So that is the kind of examples where I'm saying, let me give you data that will make your job better tomorrow. And by sharing those insights, then I give the notion that I know more. I have more of that.
So, if I understand you correctly, both in the newsletter or any other channel that I have for content distribution, most of my content would be around some form of educating the market. And that way I would establish myself as a or the company as a thought leader. And then people would want to buy from me.
Yes, but it's different kind of education. Again, I don't want statistics. I don't want um, a number that says 20% again of all marketing people um, quit their job after 6 months. I don't know, whatever it is. What am I supposed to do with it? That's irrelevant to me.
It needs to be
Or
actionable.
it needs to be actionable. It must be actionable. Or, you know, 30% or 95% of startups are not able to raise funds in their seed stage. What do you want me to do with that piece of information? Okay, now teach me how to be successful. So it has to be actionable. And startups should stay away from their sometimes almost possessed mindset around their product and how brilliant their product is. No one cares about your product. No one. Everyone cares about their own little desk at home or in the office, wherever they are, and how they can make their job easier and better and make them look good. Give people that.
Got it. I really love that strategy, Moti. And I think also it would connect everyone within the company more to what the company is actually doing, right? Because you're focusing on how you can help others and the world. And I think people gravitate towards that compared to what's in it for me. How am I going to generate more revenue this quarter?
Yeah. Yeah. Stop selling. The bottom line is stop selling, start giving. Stop. The best way to sell your product is not to sell it at all.
I think this also reminds me of another point. I think some sales expert was saying, if you want to sell me something, the first thing that I want you to do is teach me something. Don't try to sell, just teach me something I didn't know about the industry or product. And once you teach me something, now suddenly we have a different connection going on between us. And suddenly I want to listen, I want to hear more. So it's interesting that you can look at it at the micro level, whether it's a sales pitch compared to what is the content strategy or marketing strategy of the company. So it applies both to the micro and to the macro.
Exactly. Every word matters in marketing and in content. And if you carefully choose what it is that you're trying to deliver, if you make it about the audience and not yourself, then you're going to start getting the brand recognition and the inbound that you're going after. Another thing I'm going to pivot to inbound versus outbound. I know we spoke about it a lot when we work together. When it comes to startups, I really don't believe in outbound sales. I really believe in inbound. Now, I'm not saying not to experiment with outbound, but what I'm saying is that typically your runway is very, very short. You don't have a lot of money to burn on outbound efforts. But if your content is good and if your engagement is good, you can do a lot of things for free and increase your inbound marketing. And I think that a lot of startups are thinking outbound first versus inbound. Once you start thinking inbound, this is where you challenge yourself to share with the world, with your vertical, powerful content that will create exposure and lead. When you think outbound, you're thinking push strategy. But don't do push, do pull. Let the people come in and force yourself to create good content.
I like that a lot, Moti. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Is there any last words you'd like to share with early startup founders?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot. Look, it's not easy to start a company. So many things are going in. Marketing is definitely not a science. Um, and you really have to stay true to yourself in order to make it work and not be opportunistic. From my experience, it is the opportunistic founders and CEOs who are typically failing. So that would be my concluding words.
Got it. Thanks so much, Moti. How can people reach out to you or learn about Atlantic brands?
Absolutely. So you can look me on LinkedIn, obviously, Moti Elkaim, or Google Atlantic Brands, and feel free to reach out and discuss whatever it is that you need to solve in your marketing operations.
Thanks so much, Moti.